Hello everybody, my name is Nootmad and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 video. And I am finally back after a bit of a break. Just been setting up a few things, most notably my new computer. The parts took a while to come and just took a while for me to set everything up. But everything's all good now, I'm ready to go and ready to keep making content for you guys. So aside from that, I've also decided that I'm going to start streaming at some point soon because primarily the Hunt 2020 is going to start. I'm not sure when, but I'm guessing it'll be soon, and so I want to try my hand at that. And aside from that, I also want to try stream other games for you guys as well. So if you guys have any preferences for games you want to see me play on stream, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to add those to the list. But yeah, aside from that, let's just get straight into the build, and this will be my triple threat Moze build. It's aptly named because you can use 3 different class mods, those being the Rocketeer, the Raging Bear, and the Minesweeper class mod, which is the primary class mod for this build, and is the one that will let you do a crazy amount of damage. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get straight into the skills. So this is a standard 3-tree build, and it's nothing too special about that. We max out Skagden because it is Skagden. It scales well beyond what the card initially says. You get way more than 15% bonus instant damage because it gets Mayhem scaling, which means you can do a crazy amount of splash damage crazy amount of incendiary damage, sorry, when you do splash damage. We also have means of destruction. We also have torque cross promotions because we want extra splash damage. Stainless steel bear because once again this build does focus or can focus on using auto bear class mods through Rocketeer and Raging Bear, so that's why we have extra points in here. We also have auto bear because you can use a Rocketeer class mod for this, and you can maximize the usage of having auto bear to draw aggro and just deal a ton of damage to enemies near you. We have Pull the Holy Pin because we are using a Minesweeper class mod. We want to be able to maximize the chances that the Minesweeper micro nades can crit, and Pull the Holy Pin can help us do that. Aside from that, we also have Vampire for healing ourselves, as well as Iron Bear. We have To the Last. It's a very useful utility skill. Once again, it's a single point, so there's no reason not to pick that. Helps you maintain Too Angry to Die, which is the Guardian perk that increases your fight for your lifetime when you're doing damage. And it can also help to just deal a bit more damage while you're down to help you get up if needed. Aside from that, we also have Short Fuse because it is easily Moze's best skill in the game, and it's also one of her best cap zones. Deals a ton of damage, especially with the way it scales now, and yeah, it's just a very useful damage skill to have. Moving on from that, we have the Red Tree, picking up Security Bear, Armored Infantry, Drowning a Brass, and Experimental Munitions. Nothing too surprising here, but just want to point out that Security Bear does a bit more than what it says on the card. So yes, we know that the Bubble Shield reduces damage taken, but Prismatic has also found that you get flat damage reduction even if your shield is not up as Iron Bear. So just having this skill just basically lets Iron Bear take a lot less damage than it normally would. I know this isn't on the card, so we're not sure if this is an intended effect or not, but I just wanted to point that out to you guys anyway. And moving on that, we have the Bottomless Mags tree. Once again, nothing too special if you guys are familiar with the way I build Moze and have seen my skill tree breakdown videos. Yeah, nothing too special here. We just have Cloud of Lead redistribution to help with our ammo economy and maintain our consecutive hits anoint for as much as we can. Stoke the Embers synergizes well with experimental munitions in the Red Tree as well as Skagden. It just boosts the amount of incendiary damage we do, which means we can just deal a ton of damage to flesh-based targets. We also have Scrappy, very useful skill to have. It's just extra gun damage. The mode swap speed helps a lot when we're using cards like the Flipper, which means we can swap between elements on the fly. Russian Offensive, it's lifesteal, it's a single point, very useful. We also have Scorching RPMs because it buffs Iron Bear as well as Moze, and having extra crit damage is also always very useful. We have Specialist Bear as well, because once again this is also a slightly varied Iron Bear build, so you can actually use any Iron Bear com to very great effect, and that's what Specialist Bear is in here for, just to boost the damage we can do. And we also have Some for the Road. It's a very useful skill to have to kill bosses or just enemies that have a ton of health. Being able to just dish out a ton of damage deal a theoretically infinite amount of damage for 5 seconds is really useful. So if you have weapons like the Sandhawk that consume a ton of ammo but able to deal a ton of damage, and also combined with the Minesweeper class mod, getting in and out of Iron Bear can just increase your DPS by an absolute ton. So that's why I settled for that. As for the hard points I'd recommend for this build, unfortunately this isn't like the BFG Iron Bear build I posted a little while back. We don't have access to Corrosive Saber because it needs an extra 4 points in here, and to be honest I'm not entirely sure a more optimal place to draw points from, because this build is more focused towards Minesweeper with also a bit of flexibility for the other class mods as well. So yeah, that's my thinking behind why I didn't pick up Corrosive Saber. And another reason why we didn't pick up Grizzled at all or Explosive Punctuation is mostly because we also have Topped Off, which is the Guardian rank perk that decreases our cooldown while our shields are active. It's just a very useful skill to have, a very useful Guardian perk, sorry, and it just works really well with the way Moze plays. And in all honesty, with the way Moze is now, and with the way Iron Bear is now, with the amount of damage they do, by the time you're finished with the duration of an Iron Bear, everything will be dead, and by the time you get to your next encounter with the new mobs in a different area, Iron Bear will most likely be back off cooldown. So that's my thinking as to why I didn't invest into any cooldown reduction skills like that as I typically would in most other builds. So yeah, that's my thinking behind skill trees, and we'll just get straight into the gear. So as far as the gear goes, there's nothing too overly specific to make this build work. Any gun that deals a decent amount of base damage as well as doing splash just works really well. But bearing in mind, weapons like the Light Show and the Monarch also work incredibly well with this build. They're not the most optimal because they don't do splash, but they're really fun and they still work really well for basically every mobbing situation in this game. But if I could pick 4 weapons that I would use exclusively for this build, they would be the Sandhawk, the Flipper, the Miscreant, and the Light Show. Other weapons that I'd recommend you can use are the Beacon, the Chaosin, Plague Bearers. You can use the Soul Render, the Hell Shock, the Boomsicle. There are a ton of guns you can use. So basically pick your poison, whatever gun that deals splash and deals a decent amount of base damage will work really well for you. So as far as the anoint goes, you can I guess use 2 or 3 different ones. My number 1 recommendation would be consecutive hits. Consecutive hits can be maintained by damage over time through Skag Den, as well as throwing grenades. So it's just very easy to maintain those consecutive hits anoint damage cap, which makes you be able to do a ton of damage almost always. Flipper is just a very useful weapon to have, has a lot of pellets, does splash, it means you can proc Skag Den, can proc Short Fuse and just deal a ton of damage. We also have the Miscreant, once again does a ton of splash, good base damage, it's a no-brainer pick. And the Light Show, it's a ×4 weapon, lots of pellets, high fire rate, lots of damage, and works really well with Minesweeper as well. So yeah, that's the guns out of the way, and now we can move on to the shield. The shield isn't really specific as to what you have to use. You can use Old Gods, for example, or you can use a Transformer, you can use a Stopgap, you can use a Recharger. So yeah, any shield that you prefer will work well. I, however, have decided to go for a Shock Old God because my Flipper and my Sandhawk are Shock, which means I can boost their damage by a little bit. So for the sake of min-maxing, an Old God is technically the best shield for that. The anoints don't really matter because we're not going to be getting in and out of Iron Bear a lot, like we might for some other Moze builds. This Moze build is typically built for just purely Moze, or you can swap out the class mod and just try and stay in Iron Bear for as long as you can. So there's really no specifics in that regard. So basically, use whatever shield you want. The anoint doesn't really matter either. Moving on from that, we have the Minesweeper class mod. This is the star of this build, and it's what enables us to do a ton of damage. Basically, every time we crit, there's a chance to spawn a mini grenade that can explode. They can be they get proc by Vampire, which means you can heal yourself as Moze. They also crit, which means they can proc themselves again, which basically creates a cascade of damage, and you can easily hit damage numbers of like 1 billion, for example, if you get lucky. The stat rolls I'd suggest to get on your Minesweeper is 1 redistribution and 4 torque cross promotions. Now you can also get 4 Skag Den as well, but due to the way Skag Den works and for current thinking we don't believe it's intended to scale the way it does, I wouldn't suggest, or at least make it a point to tell you guys to farm for a +4 character and minesweeper class mod. If you have one, it will work great, but aside from that, just for the sake of continuity and if there was to be changes with the way Moze works, just having a tall cross motion boosting minesweeper class mod will work best. So that's my thinking on that. And as for the substats, splash damage, weapon damage, and grenade damage will work best. Splash damage, weapon damage because it will buff the weapons that we're using, and grenade damage because it will buff the minesweeper damage, or minesweeper micronade damage. Moving on from that, we also have the cloning Madden and tracker. Once again, it's a staple for most builds. Level doesn't really matter, so if you can get a low level one with this anoint, that'll be great because that way you're not likely to kill yourself. But yeah, cloning Madden tracker works really well with vampire, as well as means of destruction to help us get ammo back and maintain our consecutive hit anoints. And it also has the on grenade throw anoint, which is one of the best anoints for Moze. It's easy to use. These grenades can regen themselves, which means we can always have a grenade ready to throw to proc these anoints. So that's the grenade I decided to go with. And finally, we have the relic. Now I've decided to go for a Snowdrift Victory Rush. Snowdrift prefix isn't required, but I just like it because it gives Moze extra mobility, and in her trees currently, Moze doesn't really have any extra movement speed bonuses. So being able to move around a bit faster than usual will help a lot. The substats I have are radiation damage, magazine size, and area of effect damage. Area of effect damage helps with the amount of splashy damage you do, and it also buffs the minesweeper micronades as well, which helps to increase your DPS through that. Magazine size is always good to have because it synergizes well with the consecutive hits anoint, because you're able to shoot a lot longer than you typically would, and it just works out really well with the way Moze currently is set up. But yeah, so that's it for the gear. And as far as the class mods go, you can, like I mentioned at the start of this video, you can swap in a Rocketeer class mod and just use Auto Bear as a form of aggro relief and constant DPS over a wide range of time. Aside from that, you can also use a Raging Bear class mod. So just because it's a Raging Bear class mod, works really well with Iron Bear. And despite the fact that we don't have Corrosive Saber on our skill tree, you can still just as easily use Target Softening and Hammer Down Protocol to combine together to be able to deal a ton of damage. You can still do a ton of splash damage as well, which means you can proc Vampire, which means you can keep your Iron Bear up and alive for as long as possible, because the Raging Bear class mod theoretically increases the amount of duration you have within that. So yeah, those are the three main class mods I recommend for this, but while on foot, I mostly recommend the minesweeper class mod, and basically depending on the amount of content you're doing, you can swap in the Raging Bear class mod and the Rocketeer class mod as well, just depending on what you're doing in the game. So yeah, that's about it for the build. Hope you guys found it informative. If you did, let me know in the comments below, and of course if you had any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll be sure to answer them. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.